Thank you, everybody. I am aware it is 6:02, but we did have quite a collection of people at the back door, so we're looking to try and get them in as quick as possible. But we do have timelines, and I thank you all for giving up your time and coming here this evening. I think can't hear. Can we turn this up or something? Thank you. Give me a wave. Okay. How's that? Better? Thumbs up. That's what I like. Okay. I think in the first instance, you should know who is this facilitator for this evening's meeting. My name is Sue Smith. And for the last 6 years, I've lived in Ulverston itself. And for 44 years before that, I lived on a farm at the back of Ulverston. My public life started in local government while I was on that farm, and I had 14 years in the local government sector. I was the last warden of the community of Ulverston and the first mayor of the Central Coast community in the 1993 amalgamations. I had a time as the president of the Local Government Association. After those 14 years, I'm not a person who thinks we should all sit on our seat for 40 or 50 years. We should move on and give new ideas and energy to things. And I was asked to consider standing for a seat in the Legislative Council. I did that, and I had 16 years in the Legislative Council from 1997 to 2013. And in that time, I had 5 years as President of the Legislative Council. When I resigned from the Legislative Council, again for the same reasons, it's someone else's turn, in the particular time of those few years now, I have actually had 3 terms as an independent director on the Tasmanian Farmers and Graziers Association. I have completed that now. I was chairman of MAST for the statutory period that the legislation allows for a chair to sit in the seat. I was the transition chair for West North West Tourism when there were some concerns and problems on the North West Coast with their affinity with the Cradle Coast Authority. And in 2017, I was the commissioner for Glenorchy for 11 months during that particular process. I am at the moment currently an RACT board member in my 3rd term there. I have been a Rotary member. I'm the immediate past president of Rotary in Ulverston in my community. In the middle of last year, I was appointed by the Governor to the position of Parliamentary Standards Commissioner, which is set out under the Integrity Commission Act. Just of latter times, I have been appointed to be chair of a local government review that over the next 18 months will look at local government into the future so communities can have their dreams and aspirations of how they see their community should be into the next 30 or 40 years. And that is a work in progress that undoubtedly, when it's ready to go, communities all around the state will be asked to have input in. My son is now, and his son, so son and grandson, are working the rural property, and I have a daughter who's a school principal on the North West Coast. So that's me, peoples. Like any meeting, it is important to inform you of the exits, the back, the side, the top. We're not anticipating any need to leave, but if there is a necessity for any emergency, please follow the directions of the staff and everybody leave calmly and appropriately. There are some rules, of course, around any meeting, and the rules are quite clear. The first rule is that we all maintain our dignity. We are all here to learn, to listen, to take on board the information that is presented, and then we can vote, we can go away and make our judgments of this evening's proceedings. I'm asking everyone to please turn your mobile phones off or onto silent, please, because that is a disruption, particularly if somebody is putting a motion forward. My rules usually are, I don't have to use them, I might say, but my rules are if anybody gets out of hand and won't sit down when they're asked, I adjourn the meeting till they sit down or leave. If we sit here to the appointed finish time at 8 o'clock, which has some flexibility, but if we sit here till the appointed time at 8 o'clock and that person is still unruly, then they will be the person blamed for 160 people coming out this evening to listen, to learn and to have their opinion. I'm not expecting the problem, but I always do forewarn there are always actions if necessary. It is the intention to actually tape this meeting this evening. The IT from the Huon Valley Council will check that early next week to ensure there's nothing defamatory in it, and it will go on to YouTube. Now, it has to be checked because it will be the Huon Valley Council putting it onto YouTube, and as such, they will be the responsible party for that. So I do remind anybody who may think I'll tape a bit of this or anything else, that if this moves further than this process, make sure it's clear and it doesn't put you individually in any circumstance for the fact that you have loaded something on. So they are just some clear pieces of advice so that we are all well aware of the process. The first item on this particular agenda, we have Mr. Tim Tierney, and if he can come to the microphone, Mr. Tierney will give us a resume of this issue and where it started and where it's finishing at this particular time, and we will then move to the proponent, the lodger of the petition, Mr. Donnelly, who will come forward and make his presentations. We're looking at 10 minutes for each of those individuals. I've got a timekeeper here that will give me a thumbs up. When there's a little bit of time left to go, they'll be reminded so that they can close up their comments, and that will apply all through the evening. Close their comments up. If you've got your best statement right at the bottom, those putting forward motions, just make sure that if you think you're running over time to any great extent, you may be just reminded 30 seconds and pick your best argument in that process. There is some flexibility in timelines. I understand there are some people quite nervous when they stand up, and it takes them a little bit of time to settle down, and I will take that into consideration. But I think if we all maintain our dignity, we're all here to learn about this issue, and we all open our ears and our minds to what everybody says. One hopes at the end of the meeting we have some positive processes that will then go back in the form of a report to the next meeting of the Huon Valley Council for them to consider. So, Mr. Tierney, over to you.
I'm present just as a member of the community. If you're struggling to hear me at the back, give me a wave. I've been asked to read two papers asked by the Huon Valley Council. The first paper is a summary of the events related to the General Manager's recruitment as prepared by Huon Valley Council. The form of the summary is to have a date, and the dates begin in 2021, and an event. 15th of March, General Manager Emilio Reali tendered his resignation. 28th March, Mayor Enders appointed the Deputy Mayor to act in position of Mayor pursuant to Section 27(2)(b) of the Local Government Act for the period to the 5th of May 2021. 31st of March, the Council considered a report on the process for the appointment of the General Manager and established a General Manager recruitment panel, the panel, to facilitate the recruitment process. The panel consisted of the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and two elected councillors, being Councillor Newell and Councillor Wilson. In the absence of Mayor Enders, the Deputy Mayor assumed the mayoral function of leading the appointment of the General Manager process. The Council approved a budget of $50,000 for the recruitment of the General Manager. 22nd April. Following consideration of submissions received through a request for quotation a workshop discussion with councillors and separate discussions between the acting mayor and councillors who could not make the workshop. The panel accepted a proposal dated 13th of April 2021 from Red Giant Proprietary Limited. Am I getting through loud and clear at the back? Thank you. 5th of May, Mayor Enders returned from her leave of absence. The consultant advertised the positions on Seek, LinkedIn and the Red Giant website. 6th May, the consultant's partner emailed the consultant to express an interest in the role. 24th of May, the consultant's partner submitted an application. 26th May, the position was advertised on 5th May 2021 and the closing date for applications was initially advertised as 24th May 2021. As it had been agreed with the recruitment panel there would be a 3-week advertising period, this date was extended by Red Giant to 26 May 2021 to ensure it met the 3-week agreed timeframe. 10 June, the consultant interviewed her partner and the other applicants to determine their suitability to be shortlisted. 2nd July, during June, Councillor Wilson's seat was vacated and this delayed progression of the recruitment process during that time. A special meeting was held on the 2nd of July 2021 to replace Councillor Wilson on the panel. The panel was reappointed. The panel consisted of the Mayor and Deputy Mayor and 2 elected councillors, being Councillor Newell and Councillor Campbell. 4th July, the consultant provided the candidate report, which shortlisted 14 applicants from 85 applications. The panel did not see the candidates that had not been excluded. At this time, the consultant reported a conflict of interest in relation to one of the shortlisted applicants and suggested a management strategy that she would not be involved in any decision-making on her partner's suitability for the General Manager position and would hand over any decision-making regarding the outcome of his application to the panel. 5th of July. All panel members accepted the consultant's proposed approach to managing the reported conflict of interest. 13 to 15 July, the shortlisted applicants were interviewed. 15th of July, an allegation was made by a member of the public that there had been a leak from the process identifying some candidate names and information. The matter was subsequently referred by the Mayor to the Director of Local Government on the 16th of July 2021. 28 July, the panel provided a selection panel report which included the results of reference checking to Council, recommending 3 applications be interviewed by the full Council. 30 July, Council interviewed the 3 shortlisted applicants. 13 August, Councillor Campbell provided a letter of resignation from the General Manager's recruitment panel to the Mayor. 14 August, the Mayor responded by email to Councillor Campbell's resignation letter, and with the approval of Councillor Campbell, the Mayor forwarded the resignation to the Director of Local Government and to the Acting General Manager for Records Management. 16 August, Council resolved to not continue with one of the 3 recommended applicants and invited the 2 remaining applicants to participate in psychometric testing. 17 August, the remaining 2 applicants participated in psychometric testing through a specialised provider. 23rd August, a second consultant, specialist provider, engaged by the consultant met with Council to discuss the results of the psychometric testing. 23rd August, the Director of Local Government requested that the Mayor consider undertaking an independent review of the process and provide written assurance that the process was conducted professionally and with the necessary integrity to enable Council to make an appropriate determination. 25th August, Council resolved to proceed with the appointment subject to contract negotiations and employment contract approval, and commence an independent review of the recruitment process. The consultant was engaged by the Acting General Mayor to perform the review. 30 August. The Mayor made a statutory declaration to the Director of Local Government that the council recruitment process followed the professional advice and decisions of the council, and in this instance was conducted professionally and with the necessary integrity to enable the council to make an appropriate determination on this matter. 15 September. Council considered the report on the independent review, known as the Edge Legal Report, and resolved to proceed with the appointment. 16 September, the Council issued a media statement confirming the appointment of the General Manager and referenced what is known as the Edge Legal Report. 21 September, the General Manager commenced his appointment with the Council. 12 October, the Auditor-General released report number 2 of 21-22, Councillor General Management Recruitment Appointment and Performance Assessment. The report included a review into Council's management of the conflict of interest and subsequent appointment, and found that the inadequate management of the conflict of interest resulted in a flawed recruitment process, as the potential for bias and unfair treatment of applicants was significant throughout the process. In addition, the process undermined the public confidence in the appointment. 24th November. The Council considered recommendations out of the Edge Legal Report and the Audit Report and appointed Blackadder and Associates to support Council regarding General Manager's performance review process, and WLF Accounting and Advisory to prepare documentation and provide training on management of conflicts of interest. These appointments were made after an expression of interest process had concluded. 21 December 27-22. Training by Blackadder and Associates has been undertaken. Blackadder has also been contracted to work with the General Manager's panel for recruitment to draft a new performance agreement, conduct a general progress, 6-month progress review and annual review of the General Manager, combined with a 360-degree performance review. Cost of these services are $8,525 plus GST, in addition to travel and accommodation expenses. 1st February 2022, training by WLF Accounting and Advisory has been undertaken. Finalisation of documents to be received by the end of February 2022. Cost of the training, $7,200 plus GST. That concludes Council's summary of events. The second document, Chair, someone's seeking your attention.
Yes. Mine was the panel did not see the candidates that had not been excluded. Thank you. That is noted. Thank you. Today there was a letter arrived, and Mr. Tierney will read that. Please be assured, for Mr. Donnelly's purposes, we've had our 10 minutes. This letter will be read. Mr. Donnelly, you will have the extension of time of 3 or 4 minutes to be fair and equitable in this process. Thank you. Continue.
So the second document is a letter that's come from the Director of Local Government, addressed to the Council, to the Huon Valley Council. Dear Mayor, prior to the public meeting today about the process undertaken by the Huon Valley Council, the Council, for recruiting and appointing the new General Manager, I considered it important to provide information on several issues that may be raised. I request that this letter is read out at the meeting to inform the community in their discussion. Firstly, I am aware that this has been a challenging process for both the Council and the community. I sincerely hope that the public meeting provides an opportunity for the Council and the community to explore issues and identify a constructive way forward. Responsibility under the Local Government Act 1993. Section 61 of the Local Government Act 1993, the Act, provides the appointment of a General Manager is the responsibility of the Council. The Minister for Local Government and Planning and/or the Director of Local Government have no authority to intervene or to direct the Council to recommence the process or take alternative action. The Minister has the ability to specify principles or procedures for the recruitment of General Managers generally across the sector. This has not been required in the past. The Minister has, however, requested that the Office of Local Government work with the sector to develop principles for the recruitment of General Managers that will apply to all future processes. This work is underway. The Director has several specific functions, including the general administration of the Act. This includes promoting good governance and working with councils and councillors to ensure that they understand and can deliver on their statutory responsibilities. The former Director, Mr Craig Limkin, was advised of concerns about the way that conflicts of interest were being managed in the process of recruiting the General Manager. The former Director immediately sought advice from the Council and strongly encouraged the Council to initiate an independent review of the process. The Council accepted this advice and acted on it. Investigations. The Council's General Manager appointment process has been reviewed by several entities, including the Auditor-General, the Director and by an independent consultant. While these reviews pointed to areas of the process that could have been improved and potential conflicts of interest better managed, no breach of the Act was identified. Both the independent review and the Auditor-General also found there was no evidence that there was actual bias in Council's resolution to appoint Mr Brown as the preferred candidate. Managing conflicts of interest is a critical element in the good governance of local government. I'm encouraged by the actions taken by Council to provide additional training for all councillors following the receipt of these reports. Maintaining confidentiality is also a critical element of good governance. Disclosing confidential information undermines the integrity of the decision-making process and can undermine the confidence of the public in the Council. I'm aware that the confidential information associated with the selection process was released during the General Manager's recruitment process. Both the former Director and myself have actively investigated the disclosure, including requesting statutory declarations, accessing and reviewing files, and conducting formal interviews. I am aware of individuals that know who disclosed this information. Both the former Director and myself have requested that they provide advice on the identity of the person that disclosed this information. They have, however, been unwilling to provide that information to me or the former Director to date, and instead have resorted to playing matters out in the media. I cannot take action against individuals that commit offences under the Act without evidence. I am disappointed that individuals have chosen to frustrate the investigations by not sharing with me their knowledge. It is also disappointing that these individuals choose to express their frustrations publicly without taking steps to resolve these issues through the formal processes that are available to them. I again express my sincere hope that this public meeting provides an avenue to discuss the community's concern about the process of recruiting the General Manager and for identifying an appropriate, constructive way forward. Matthew Healy, Director of Local Government. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Yes? So I have this correct. You made a submission and it's not in the summary that's been handed out today. Okay, we will have somebody take note of that, your name, etc., and correct that process in that process. Yes, sir. Before we move on, Mr. Donnelly, if you can prepare yourself. And you have, Mr. Donnelly, an extra 7 minutes if you need it. We were 7 minutes over time on the first speaker, and it's most important that they were given that time. Mr. Donnelly will have exactly the same if he feels it necessary. Yes, sir? Yes, before he starts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I just like to relate an issue in relation to council presentation of summary appendix. I want to record it in the minutes of this meeting. On the 5th of July, the council stated in the presentation on behalf of council, all members accepted the consultant's proposed approach to managing the reported conflict of interest. The Auditor General and an email from the council's legal office in relation to this matter said this report was taken from the Auditor General's report. The Auditor General's report indicates on the 5th of July the panel resolved to accept the proposed approach to managing the reported conflict of interest. There's a difference in the both reports. One says all, the other one says the panel. Just want that recorded in the minutes because my understanding there may be some issues in those. Thank you.
You're looking to change the word all to thee. Is that correct?
I don't wish to change anyone's report, Madam Chair. I believe this should be placed in the report, and that should let me have authorities to consider that if there's business matters and issues arise for the public record. These are not a public record. There's a difference between the council presentation and the Auditor General presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Over to you.
Okay. Regarding the clarity of the timeline read out beginning on behalf of the council, I have two questions, if they could be answered here tonight by the Mayor. The first one is that in that timeline, it was reported that Joanne Inches first notified the recruitment panel that she had a conflict of interest on the Sunday, the 4th of July. Can the Mayor please confirm that, to the best of her knowledge, no one on the recruitment panel was aware of this conflict before that date? And at what time on Sunday, the 4th of July, was the candidate report forwarded through to the recruitment panel?
Thank you. If you keep going, sir, and at the end,
Okay.
then the Mayor can respond if you have other.
This public meeting is being held because residents have forced the council to hold an open inquiry into Jason Brown's appointment. Almost 10% of the residents of the Valley signed the Fix Huon Council petition to voice their concerns and their amazement at how the flawed recruitment of Jason Brown was allowed to happen. Basically, the arguments and motions from this meeting were resolved around two clear points. Firstly, does Jason Brown deserve to stay General Manager? Was Jason Brown recruited fairly and without bias? Or was he shielded by his life partner, Joanne Inches, as she secretly eliminated 71 of his rivals? Did Jason Brown show the integrity we demand from a General Manager? Or was he complicit in the flawed recruitment process? Does Jason Brown's position as General Manager deserve to be confirmed at the end of his probationary period, or should this position be re-advertised? The second point, did Mayor Enders, Deputy Mayor Doyle and the other 4 councillors who voted for Jason Brown's appointment, despite the flood of warnings regarding the bias of this appointment, fulfil their obligations to us to openly govern with leadership, or did they betray that trust and side with Jason Brown against their own residents? On the 5th of May last year, advertisements were placed for a new General Manager by Joanne Inches. By the close of applications on the 26th of May, 85 candidates had applied. One was Jason Brown, Joanne Inch's own life partner. Over the next 40 days, Joanne secretly eliminated 71 of Jason Brown's rivals. On the 4th of July, she then advised the council recruitment panel of Mayor Enders, Deputy Mayor Doyle, Councillor Newell and Councillor Campbell that she had shortened the number of candidates down to a last 14, and then at the very end informed them that one of these was her own life partner. Councillor Campbell, having warned Mayor Enders of her fears that the recruitment process was biased, unfair and with obvious conflict of interest, subsequently resigned from the recruitment panel. She acknowledged her deep concern at the process undertaken by Joanne Inches. Councillor Newell saw nothing wrong with this process, stood 100% behind Jason Brown, the best man for the job. Mayor Enders, Deputy Mayor Doyle and Councillor Newell refused to accept the recruitment process was broken, and must equally share the blame for all the problems and the expenses that have followed since then. Now, some of the obvious questions that should have been asked then and need answering now. Why did Joanne delay informing the council that she had a conflict of interest? Why did she exclude 71 of Jason's rivals and not tell the council she was doing this? Why didn't the council immediately engage a recruitment firm, a different one, to take over the recruitment and ask Joanne to stay away? Why didn't they ask to even interview the 71 of the candidates that had been rejected by Joanne Inches? How could they not look at these things? They didn't even ask Joanne if Joanne had helped Jason write his own application for the job that she was interviewing for. They didn't ask if she'd spoken to him about any of his rivals. Why did they allow Joanne to sit in on all the later interviews of Jason's rivals? Why was the recruitment panel only given the names of the final 14 candidates on Sunday the 14th before starting to evaluate them early the next morning on Monday morning? What was this unseemly rush that you get this to someone on a Sunday and then on Monday morning you're expected to start to look through the qualifications of all the other candidates? What was the rush? Did Mayor Enders and Deputy Mayor Doyle show any leadership here? Did they surrender their leadership and our trust in them? 2 days before Jason Brown was confirmed on the 15th of September, I, along with many others, wrote to all councillors and pleaded with them not to confirm this appointment before a full independent inquiry was held. The Huon Valley Residents and Ratepayers Association, the body that represents our community on council matters, also pleaded with the council to delay the appointment. Councillor Prince has said he was flooded with such calls from a wide variety of people from the valley. At this September 15th meeting, 6 councillors, Mayor Enders, Deputy Mayor Doyle, Councillors Newell, Clark, Lovell and O'May could recognise no bias, no flaws, no conflict of interest that could possibly delay them from voting for Jason Brown. Only 2 councillors, Councillor Campbell and Councillor Gibson, voted against. Only these 2 councillors, Councillor Gibson and Campbell, showed the insight and leadership that was desperately needed at the time. Councillor Prince was absent from the meeting and didn't vote. Shortly after this, a small number of angry residents were determined not to let this go unchallenged and formed Fix Huon Council. We wrote a petition, we painted signs and set out to get the 638 signatures needed to force the council to hold this very meeting here today. We worried if other residents were as angry as us, and it seemed that 638 signatures might be a long, hard road to road. On the first day at our table in front of Woolworths, we got 210 signatures. We had 2 former general managers of the council, a former mayor, and many former councillors of this council signed that day. People came up to us and said, "I've heard all about this, where do I sign?" Others had heard bits and pieces, and when informed of the background, 19 out of 20 of these people signed. Comments like, "Good on you for doing this," and "Don't let them get away with it," came thick and fast. It wasn't just our small group in Huon Council that was upset, but there was a wide groundswell of anger out there in the community. We went on to gather 1,400 signatures from residents in a short period of time. People from all over the valley, places I'd never even heard of before, had signed. Now, being mayor and deputy mayor isn't about running around getting your picture in the paper, nor should it be used as a stepping stone to state parliament. It should be about leading and not surrendering here. We will, at the next council election, have a say in what we think of the leadership of these 6 councillors: Mayor Enders, Deputy Mayor Doyle, Councillors Newell, Clark, O'May and Lovell. And I hope we remember all their names, and I hope we exercise our right to vote. But we don't get a vote for Jason Brown. He's on a 5-year contract worth $1.25 million, a contract that will need to be confirmed at the end of his 6-month probationary period. The problem is these same 6 blind councillors who refuse to recognise any conflict of interest will now be the ones who vote on whether Jason stays or goes. Now let's talk a little bit more about this dysfunctional council. You may be surprised to hear that before today, there's only ever been one council that has ever been forced by a petition to hold a public meeting by its residents, to hold an inquiry into a council decision. Only once in the history of the Huon Valley, only once, and that council is this council here today. This public meeting is the second public meeting that this council has been forced to front up to their residents. This public meeting led by Mayor Enders, Deputy Mayor Doyle. Now they've broken their own record and to be ashamed to be dragged twice to a public meeting. After all that's been said and written on this subject, is the council interested in hearing the concerns of its own residents? Does it hope this controversy will be swept under the carpet? I asked to meet all the councillors to listen to my concerns on Jason Brown's appointment. Only 3 councillors, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Campbell and Councillor Prince, the 3 that didn't vote for Jason Brown, agreed to meet with me. The rest, the 6 blind councillors, all refused to meet me. What a show of concern and leadership by those 6. I challenged Mayor Enders to a public debate to give her a chance to explain how she got the council into this dilemma, to give the council side of the argument, a dilemma that has made our council the laughing stock of all councils in Tasmania. And no surprise, she declined the invitation. Finally, this wasn't a case of these 6 blind councillors missing some obscure little warning sign. This was a case of these blind 6 deliberately ignoring all the warning signs, ignoring the pleas from their residents to halt the recruitment until an independent investigation. Why? Why did they ignore such sound advice? Why did they allow Joanne Interest to continue with the recruitment when they knew her life partner was a candidate? Why do these same 6 councillors continue to this very day ignoring all these warning signs? Why should these same 6 blind councillors now be allowed to sit on Jason Brown's probationary review? That is some of the things we want to hear the answers for today. And finally, the middle of the dartboard here today is Was Jason Brown fairly recruited? And has this council taken responsibility for the ensuing chaos? And the answer to both those questions is no. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Enders, there were two specific questions asked at the beginning of that presentation. Do you wish to answer those questions or not? That's your call at this time.
Thank you, Chair. I will need to seek clarification from Mr Donnelly, just in the first relation to the first question, which I believe you wanted me to respond to the best of my knowledge. Sorry, Archie, I can't see where you are. Oh, you're there. Okay. Could you just repeat that first question, please? Just want to make sure that I do respond appropriately.
My accepting was when, to the best of your knowledge, can the Mayor confirm that, to the best of her knowledge, no one on the recruitment panel was aware of this conflict before the date of the 4th of July?
To the best of my knowledge, the first time that the panel would have been aware of the relationship would it?
I didn't say of the panel, I said anyone on the panel, not the panel as such. I know that that won't be in the panel, but any of the people on the panel, the 4 panellists on the panel, have any of them been aware of this conflict before that date?
Not that I'm aware of. Right, and in relation to your second question, which was for me to provide the time.
When was the pen that forwarded
to the panel? Yeah. I would need to take that on notice because I don't have that email in front of me to give you the exact time when that was received. We'll take that on notice. We'll come back to you. Thank you.
You have your hand up, so can you identify yourself, please? No, I'm not opening the floor, I'm sorry, to all councillors. I made it quite clear. The role here this evening of councillors is to come, to listen, to learn, to make judgment ready for the decision on this public meeting. The Mayor is the only person, if there's a question asked, that can refer it to somebody else if she so wishes. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we now are about to move into the motions and you have copies of them before you. And quite clearly, thank you to those. There's 33 submissions were received during the advertising period, the 7th of January to the 28th of January, from 27 members of the public, acknowledging we need to clarify that lady's down there. 2 submissions were received after the closing time, citing lack of internet access available to lodge within the time. Both submissions have been included in this summary. Any further submissions received after that time have not been included in this document. However, they will be placed onto the Council's website. 32 submissions raised a broad number of concerns with the General Manager recruitment process that they say must be addressed by the Council. 3 submissions noted that the process was flawed, however the Council have responded appropriately. Where the submission is or includes a motion, the summary of that motion will be provided in the table. A number of questions were asked within the submission. Those questions and answers, where they can be provided, are included within the documents that you have. We have 20 motions before us this evening. And the first 3 are from Mr Donnelly, and that is out of respect for the fact that he is the person who organised the petition process. Any motion was given 7 days in notice before this meeting. and motions that weren't being given at that time will not be accepted at the meeting. Motions, as I said, put forward by the lodger of the petition are taking precedence over other motions, and Mr Donnelly is well aware that he's the first person to come forward. When he puts forward his motion, I will ask for a seconder. I will ask the person that's going to second it to raise their hand, and please, for the purposes of documentation, I ask that you give your name and just the area you live in. I say the area you live in just to make sure that we clarify that everybody here is an entitled member of the Huon Valley area. We don't want the fact that you live at 12 Smith Street. I think that's an invasion of the privacy, but just your name, and I live in Franklin or Huon or Glen Huon, is enough for the purposes of the documentation. When the motion has been seconded, the person that moves the motion will have 3 minutes, and other people who wish to speak to the motion or against the motion will have 2 minutes. The mover of the motion will then have the opportunity to close debate. I will determine the number of votes by a show of hands. If it is clear-cut and that is accepted, that will be documented. If there is a concern or it looks close, the staff will do the count, and we will have to just wait while they count the hands for and the hands against, again to ensure that we have appropriate documentation of this meeting here this evening. So I will ask that Mr Donnelly come forward, and Mr Donnelly will actually move motion number 1. We have 19 motions now because we did have one withdrawn this evening. If there are other people in the meeting who consider as we move through the motions that theirs has been covered in some form, it is still your right to put your motion, or it is your right to stand and say, I'm comfortable, I think they've covered what I was going to do, and formally withdraw it. So that will be the process as we move through the 19 motions we have before us. So Mr Donnelly, the clock is ticking, and I'll ask you to formally put your motion.
It is imperative the General Manager has the confidence of the community and the Huon Valley staff for their role as boss of all the council employees.
Just a moment, please. I have written that at the end, motion 1, so we better clarify this.
This is motion 1. This is my preamble before I actually move the motion.
Well, I'm looking for you to move the motion. We'll get it second, and then you can have your preamble. I'm quite confident that there will be somebody that will second your motion, Mr Donnelly, but we need the motions.
I hope so.
He's given you the message. Thank you. I'm happy to read the motion.
Therefore, I move that at the end of this General Manager's probationary period, his employment should be terminated and a truly independent recruitment agency be engaged to re-advertise the position of General Manager.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder to the motion? Can you please give a name and a community of residence? We have that recorded. Thank you. Thank you now, Mr Donnelly, you have 3 minutes.
The General Manager is the most important non-elected person in the council. They have a 5-year contract worth $1.25 million. They hire and fire staff. They have the ability to sign contracts up to $249,000 without oversight from councillors. It's a position that carries the need for the highest level of integrity and trust of the community. Jason Brown's appointment was predicated on his ability to show leadership and honesty, and he failed both at the first hurdle. Jason Brown's conflicted appointment isn't a stain from the past that will slowly fade, but very much a real problem for the future. Let me give you one simple example why. What happens if after the council advertises for a substantial contract, say 10 tenderers are received, and the head of that department shortlists those down to the 2 preferred tenderers. What if the head of the department then informs Jason Brown that one of those last 2 is in fact his own brother? Now, how should Jason handle this? He can't possibly send the head of the department away and ask to see all the other tenders for himself, the right thing to do, because that would invalidate his own recruitment. Jason Brown can't accept the secret elimination of the other 8 tenderers because this would invalidate the Auditor General's concern over conflict of interest, and it would invalidate the trust of our community has in his independence. So what is the answer? There is no answer to this. This is called the horns of a dilemma. He is damned if he does, and he's damned if he doesn't. There is no doubt about that this is a problem of Jason Brown's own making. Jason Brown allowed himself to be appointed by a tainted recruitment and will forever be caught up by it. There is no one to blame here but Jason Brown himself.
30 seconds, Mr. Donnelly.
Sorry?
30 seconds.
The only way for the council to resolve this problem is that at the end of Jason Brown's probationary period, they must re-advertise the position of General Manager, and then, and only then, will we get a General Manager who has the trust and the support of our community.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Do we have a speaker against the motion? Yes, thank you. Please name in the first instance.
My name is Diana Leader from Dover. And whilst I appreciate the strength of feeling and dismay at the flawed process that was undertaken, and I share that sense of dismay myself, I rise to speak against this motion. I feel very strongly that unless Mr Brown has not performed his role as required, there are no grounds for ratepayers' money to be wasted and diverted from council staff and diverting council staff from their role of delivering services by calling for his resignation. It serves no purpose to us. It just means we go through another process that people will also find is unsatisfactory for some reason or other. Using hypothetical examples of how one assumes that Mr Brown might act given a set of hypothetical circumstances also serves no purpose. We're Australians, we give people a fair go. We understand that what has happened has not been dealt with in the best manner. But now it is up to Mr Brown to win our confidence and to demonstrate that he is a good general manager for us. I don't know Mr Brown. Tonight was the first time I saw him and met him. So I'm not speaking from any personal knowledge, but I am speaking from experience as a local government practitioner and from a deep concern about ratepayers' money being used appropriately and for people to be able to get on with the job.
Your time is nearly up, ma'am.
So I urge you, please, to not vote for the dismissal of Jason Brown.
Do we have a speaker in favour of the motion? Yes, thank you. At the back, yes, the one that's just taken the mask off. We've had Mr Donnelly put the motion and it was seconded. He's spoken to it. I've asked for someone to speak against. In fairness, I'm now looking if there is somebody who wishes to speak in favour of the motion before I allow Mr Donnelly to close debate and we vote. Is there anybody who wishes to speak in favour of the motion? Yes, thank you. Please give your name for the purpose of identification.
I'm Amber Layton from Signet. I just wanted to quickly add that if Jason Brown is in fact the best candidate for the job, then he'll be hired by any future recruitment company and he shouldn't have any fear that he won't be found as the best candidate. So by accepting the role, knowing that it was a flawed process. He's proven he's not the best candidate to represent us. And if he indeed wants to give us our confidence back, he should step down prior to his 6-month probationary period and be hired in an unflawed process. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Donnelly, do you wish to close the debate now, please, on motion 1? Mr Donnelly, if you'd like to close the debate. Yes, you have 1 minute to close debate. No new information, just summing up. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a bit of misunderstanding. I didn't ask for him to resign. I asked for his position to be re-advertised. Now, Huon Council believes our community needs to move on from this fiasco, and the only way to resolve this problem is at the end of Jason Brown's probationary period, the council must re-advertise the position of General Manager, and then and only then will we get a General Manager who has the trust of the community, and the scars from this unsavoury period can start to heal.
Thank you. I will ask all those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. All those against? Motion is carried. Thank you, Mr Donnelly. Your second motion. Read the motion, please, and then we'll look for a seconder.
So many things to find. Here we go. My second motion is that Mayor Enders and Deputy Mayor Doyle take full responsibility for the debacle of this selection process and the consequent lack of trust in them by the community, and resign.
Do I have a seconder for that motion, please? Yes, thank you. A name? Thank you. You may continue, Mr Donnelly. Donnelly, yes.
The whole dilemma of this appointment might have started with Joanne Inches, but it was allowed to become a crisis by the complete lack of leadership shown by Mayor Enders and Deputy Mayor Doyle. Had these two understood what the meaning of leadership was from the very beginning, there'd be no crisis today. There'd be no conflicted General Manager today. There'd be no wasted $25,000 on 2 legal opinions. There'd be no wasted cost of this public inquiry. The countless hours of council staff dealing with this matter, the wasted $8,500 on a report for the General Manager's performance review process, another wasted $7,200 on training councillors to understand conflict of interest. That's over $40,000 in ticking. All this ratepayer money and wasted because of the failed leadership of the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor. And for what gain? What do we get from this waste? Someone must take responsibility for this fiasco, and they are the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor. It's not good enough to say sorry and say, I could have done better. Our leaders are expected to do better. The conflict of interest was so glaringly obvious. How did they miss it? They didn't handle it badly. They ignored the problem. They ignored it when they couldn't continue to. They ignored it then, and they continue to ignore it today. It is through their mismanagement of the recruitment that we now have a General Manager
30 seconds, Mr Donnelly.
Who lacks the confidence of the community, and he was not appointed in an open and fair way. As the elected leaders of our council, Mayor Enders and Deputy Mayor Doyle must take full responsibility for this debacle and resign.
Thank you. Do I have a speaker against the motion, please? We don't have a speaker against the motion. Yes, we do have someone. Thank you.
Archie, you've put a strong argument, but I don't agree with this motion. I think that mistakes have been made in the recruitment and the appointment process. And I think we all make mistakes. And this has ended up with a stuff-up. But I think we're turning this from a problem to a crisis, which doesn't need to be further developed. I think that both the mayor and deputy mayor have worked hard for the municipality. Not always correctly, but they've worked hard. They're individuals, they're humans like us, and they've put in a lot of effort. And when they first moved to become councillors and their work in the fires, they did extremely well. So I think we've got to take a more balanced approach, and we've got to say, how can we build a stronger council, not weaken it by causing them or asking them to resign? I don't see that that's making it stronger. We need a council body that is stronger than it is at the moment. Unfortunately, our council is often led by the bureaucracy, and it needs to be a management body. And we need to get behind our council, and we need to find ways in which we, as the people of the Huon Valley, can support and guide what they're doing. I don't think this motion should succeed. I think we should vote against it.
Thank you. I'm looking for somebody who wishes to speak in favour of the motion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the previous speaker made some very good points in relation to the members on council. And it's not about the individual as a person. They are obviously good people within themselves, because they wouldn't have been elected as councillors unless they were. And I think what is important is the issue itself of the conflict of interest, and whether we want a society as we move forward that has these sort of nepotism and inappropriate practices in government or any instrumentality or any organisation as a way of life. And we don't want that in our society. It could have been any one of our family applying for that position. And would we want those people in that position? No, we would not. I fully support this motion. I think it's something that should be considered, but I understand the person's previous comments. These are good people, but there's some big, big mistakes made. Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
I would like to speak against the motion. Mr Donnelly keeps complaining about the money being wasted in various inquiries and legal advice. If we go his way and sack the whole council or sack the mayor, more money will be wasted. There is no guarantee whatsoever we'll get a better council, and it's a great shame that all the people who have been complaining about this council didn't turn their X-ray vision on the previous council, which was sacked. Thank you.
Mr Donnelly, can you close debate, please?
Fix How Huon Council believes the only way the community can move on from this fiasco is for the two main perpetrators to take full responsibility of their failings and resign, to recruit a new general manager and start to let the scars heal in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? I think we better have a count, thank you. Somebody counting upstairs, thank you. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Please hold them in the air for a bit of exercise while the ladies count. 69 in favour of the motion. Do we know the numbers we have in the room definitely, or I'll call those against the motion. Please raise your hands now. We better ensure this is correct. Motion is carried. Is that correct, ladies? 72 against, 69 for. Thank you. Motion is carried. Mr. Donnelly, motion 3. And then I'll warn Pat Singe on the behalf of the Huon Valley residents and ratepayers. You're up next.
I move that no money should have been paid to Red Giant and that any that may have been already paid should be recovered and returned to the ratepayers of the Huon Valley Council to be used towards the recruitment of the next General Manager.
Do I have a seconder to the motion, please? Please identify yourself. Thank you. Continue, Mr. Donnelly.
The Council set a budget of $50,000 to cover the recruitment of the General Manager. Joanne Interest had a duty of care to undertake this employment by the Council to a high standard and in the best interests of her employer, the Huon Valley Council. Joanne failed this duty of care miserably. Joanne Interest failed to inform the Council in a timely manner. She had a conflict of interest. And when she started to secretly eliminate Jason Brown's rivals, she negated her responsibility to carry out her role of independence. From that moment on, she ceased to honour her contract with the Council. Joanne Interest should not be rewarded for orchestrating this terminally flawed recruitment process that resulted in the employment of an integrity-challenged candidate, a person that does not command the confidence of the community. Joanne Interest did not serve the Council explicitly or implicitly to the terms of her contract and should return all monies paid to her, return to the ratepayers of the Council to be used in the recruitment of a new General Manager.
Thank you. Do we have a speaker against the motion? If not, it's my intention to put the motion. Those in favour, please raise their hands. Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Pat Singe from the Huon Valley Ratepayers. If you would put your motion, sir, and then I'll call for a seconder.
Thank you. That should be good. Yes, I think that's good. Okay, so the Huon Valley Residents and Ratepayers Association moves that Huon Valley Council release the Edge legal report in its entirety, and if independent legal advice confirms that some portions absolutely have to be redacted, these should be shown in blacked out form. And 2, that Mayor Enders releases all the facts that she claims would lead to a better understanding of why councillors ignored the warnings from Edge Legal, the Huon Valley Residents and Ratepayers Associations, and many other concerned ratepayers.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, sir. Identify yourself. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So, well, the question is really simple. Why did a group of councillors stuff up when making the most important decision of their term of office? Before making the appointment, the recruitment panel had advice from Edge Legal telling them that the process was flawed and that a new recruitment consultant should have been appointed when the conflict of interest was disclosed on the 4th of July. Before making the appointment, they had this advice. They ignored this expensive advice, continued with the process, and appointed the conflicted applicant. One of the members of the recruitment panel resigned because the serious conflict of interest was being so badly dealt with. We also warned them, but of course, this was ignored as well. Ratepayers paid more than $18,000 for the Edge legal opinion, and then paid another 7,000 plus to Simmons Wolfhagen to help council decide how much of the first legal opinion could be made public. And now we learn of another $16,000 in associated costs. And what did we end up with? A so-called redacted version that is no more than a dot-point summary. We have no idea how much of the actual report has been censored. A genuine redacted version shows, in blacked-out form, how much content has been deemed unsafe, and this often indicates the context. Mayor Enders has acknowledged that the process was flawed and has told us repeatedly that the Edge Legal Report recommends, quote, that council implement a guideline or supporting document to the Code of Conduct as a best practice approach to managing conflicts of interest in recruitment, and that councillors undertake training
30 seconds, thank you.
in relation to managing conflicts of interest, unquote. When we asked the Mayor why this recommendation had been redacted, she said that it was not redacted, and yet it isn't there. Well, either it was redacted or it wasn't in the report in the first place. You really can't have it both ways. So we question, was the recommendation actually in the report? Is Council's refusal to release the entire Edge legal opinion justified, or simply more obfuscation? And what other relevant but non-defamatory information is included in the report?
Thank you, sir. Do I have a speaker against? If not, are you happy with that, sir, or do you wish to close debate? Thank you. We have a speaker here. No, that's fine, sir. We have that. No. When there is nobody wishing to speak against it, do you wish to close debate, or are you happy with? Okay, those in favour of motion 4, please raise your hands. Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Motion 5, Liz Smith. Ms Smith did give me some change of wordings to her motion, and that has been accepted from the chair. So please take note of those change of words as she introduces it. If you read it, Liz, we'll get a seconder and away you can go.
Thank you. My motion is that in the interests of transparency and accountability, the evidence for the Mayor having been granted leave of absence at the March 31st, 2021 Council meeting be made public, and Mayor Enders and Deputy Mayor Doyle provide statutory declarations that contain all the actions they undertook between March the 27th and May the 5th, 2021, in relation to the recruitment process for the General Manager, including minutes of all meetings of the panel and file notes on discussions with other parties, for example, advisors, recruitment agencies, names can be redacted, and all other relevant parties. So I'll move that motion.
Could I have a seconder, please? Seconded to the motion. Thank you, lady there. Alison. Thank you. You may continue.
Thank you, Chair. I've slightly amended this motion from the one that was on the website because I submitted that before the deadline, and a new timeline has just recently been put on the website. I've also included in the motion a request that the Council provide the evidence for the granting of leave of absence to Mayor Enders on March the 31st last year, because it's not on the agenda or in the minutes for that meeting, and I've repeatedly asked about this at Council meetings and have had the response that leave of absence was granted at that meeting. However, I've been unable to find the listing in the agenda and minutes of the closed section of that meeting. So this is the opportunity to set the record straight. We all know that the appointment of a General Manager is the most important decision that the Council has to make. And under Section 27(1)(g) and (c) of the Local Government Act, It is the responsibility of the Mayor to lead and participate in the appointment of the General Manager and to promote good governance by and within the Council. Few of us would accept that the General Manager recruitment process demonstrated good governance, and the process appears to me to have been flawed from the very outset. The question then is whether the Mayor followed the legal requirements. Mayor Enders, as chair of the panel during April, had responsibility under Section 27(1)(g) of the Local Government Act to lead and participate in the appointment of the General Manager. There's no evidence that she did lead and participate in those critical earliest stages of the appointment process. And it has not been made clear how or when she delegated responsibility to the Deputy Mayor, as required under Section 27(2) of the Act, and whether she was entitled to do so when she was not technically absent from the Council because she had not been granted leave of absence, at least by the 28th of March. The lawyers' reports on the recruitment process by both Edge Legal and Simmons Wolfhagen apparently seem to have found no breaches of the Local Government Act. In my submission, which is on the Council's website, I've asked, among many other questions, whether these legal companies were informed of the details of the process during that first month of the recruitment process, and whether the Mayor fulfilled her requirement to lead and participate in the appointment of the General Manager during that time, when it seems she had not been granted leave
Have
of
30
absence by the
seconds.
Council.
Thank you. You're running out of time. 30 seconds.
That's why it's important that both the Mayor and Deputy Mayor should now provide statutory declarations that document everything that happened during that critical first stage.
Thank you, Ms Smith. Do I have a speaker against? Yes, thank you, ma'am.
Cleanest lectern. This has got to be the cleanest lectern in Australia, I think. Whilst I understand the reasons and the desire for a lot more explanation to be made, I speak against this because I can't see that there's a lot to be gained by endlessly asking for more and more information and more explanation and finding minutiae around what hasn't been properly explained. I understand that things haven't been explained properly, and I'm sure that those people involved in it have racked their brains about how to be able to explain things a little better or a little more clearly. But I just can't vote for something that continues to ask for more information to no end. There is nothing to be done with that information.
Thank you. Do we have a speaker who wishes to speak in favour? If not, do you wish to close the debate, Ms Smith?
Yes, I would like to just close by saying that only statutory declarations, as I've described, provided by Mayor Enders and Deputy Mayor Doyle, will provide assurance that there were no breaches of the Local Government Act. I ask for your support.
Thank you. Those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. Those against? The motion is carried. Thank you. We move on to item 6. Mr Jeffrey Swan, if you'd like to come to the podium. We have 19 motions, so I would ask those with motions just to check their motion. If you think as you go through that the issues have been covered from your capacity, you do have the right to withdraw them if you so wish, but that is your call. Thank you, Mr Swan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My motion is that the Huon Valley Council engage an independent market research firm, ideally from the mainland, to conduct an employee satisfaction survey for all council staff. The survey to be completely anonymous, with all the raw results to reside with the appointed market research firm. The General Manager, the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Newell are to be completely excluded from any involvement in the creation and administering of the survey. The results of the survey are to be presented to all councillors confidentially in closed council and fed into the 6-month probation GM review process. Therefore, the timing of the survey is urgent. The survey to include job satisfaction, employee confidence in the new current GM, employee opinion on the flawed recruitment process, and whether the GM recruitment process should start again. Councillor Campbell to liaise and coordinate the survey with the council staff, possibly the HR manager, and the agency, who will maintain confidentiality between the agency and the collection in any sealed envelopes. No councillors or staff are to open any of the sealed envelopes.
Do we have a seconder to the motion? Thank you. Please identify yourself. Thank you, Mr. Swan.
Thank you. I'll be brief. The forgotten casualties in the flawed GM recruitment process are our 160 council employees. They don't have a voice. Our council staff must be given every opportunity to openly express their acceptance or otherwise of working with a conflicted general manager. The impacts on their workplace, on their daily routines, on their ability to perform their jobs is an unknown. Their ongoing confidence in the current and conflicted GM is unknown, as is their faith and trust in any decisions the GM may make on behalf of council. Working with a conflicted GM who has not shown any apparent recognition of his being at fault or having any conflict of interest in his employment which was gained through the services of his partner is an unknown quantity with respect to all of our council employees. We owe it to our council staff to give them a voice in this flawed GM recruitment process. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a speaker against? Yes, come forward then. An amendment to that motion.
I'd like to slightly amend the motion. My apologies, everyone. I'd like to slightly amend the motion, not the content as such of it, but I think it's inappropriate for elected members or councillors to become involved in what are the operational aspects of the administration. And so I'd like to ask the mover if he would accept having Councillor Campbell liaising and coordinating this service with council staff being removed from it and just have it to be administered by the HR manager of the organisation, because it's inappropriate for the councillors whose role is policy and strategy and to lead to get involved in the operational matters, and a survey of staff is an operational matter. So if, with the leave of the mover, perhaps the motion could be amended just to change that line.
I agree with that, Chair.
Thank you. That, therefore, the amendment becomes the motion. Do we have a speaker for the amendment that now becomes the motion on the agreement of Mr. Swan? Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Yes, I was also going to propose an amendment to this, and that was also going to, for the process to be run by an independent staff survey firm rather than a market research firm. I don't know which is the more appropriate, but I might suggest that to Mr. Swan. And the other suggestion that I was going to make, that the assessment would also, that the survey would also assess the level of staff morale.
Okay, so we have another amendment to the motion. Mr. Swan has graciously accepted the previous amendment, which removes Councillor Campbell from liaising and leaves it in the hands of the HR manager. And now from Ms. Smith, he has accepted into his process a change that again will ensure that the council staff will completely do the process?
Yes, that it's a staff survey firm rather than a market research firm.
Okay.
And also that there's an assessment of the level of staff morale.
Okay, so for the councillor, for the staff survey, you're looking for a specialist in the staff survey area?
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you. If any other speakers, I'll get Mr Swan to close his motion.
I have two new knees, so do excuse my walking. Thank you for the amendments to the motion. The importance of this motion is really to give the voice to the employees, and I thank you for the collaboration. If I may, market research companies also do handle personal surveys, and I know that from personal experience. So it's really for the HR manager, ideally, to find the right company, and where there's certainly no local nepotism involved, to undertake the survey, make sure it's completely anonymous, and make sure that no one else gets to see what's in those envelopes, because staff will be very, very concerned and very, very apprehensive about putting their true feelings down in an environment of the council. Thank you.
Thank you. You can stay there, Mr Swan, as you've got the next two if you're more comfortable and back and forth. You've left your assistant beside your chair, I noted.
I did, thank you.
Okay, I will put the motion. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you, Mr Swan. Motion 7.
Lisa, just a bit higher for me, thank you. Thanks very much. My next two motions have actually already been covered, but if I can just briefly read to them and we'll move from there, if I may. As a resident and a ratepayer of the Huon Valley, my motion in the public meeting is to have no confidence in the appointment of Mr Jason Brown to the position of General Manager of the Huon Valley Council. I have no confidence in the GM recruitment process, and I do not believe that our council can function properly with a conflicted person in such an important role as a General Manager. And I'm calling on his immediate resignation and requesting council that the GM recruitment process commence again. I'm also calling on council to seek the recovery of all expenses plus costs from Red Giant for the flawed recruitment process.
Do I have a seconder to that motion? Yes, thank you. Gentleman over there. Thank you. Continue, Mr Swan.
I'll be very brief because Mr Donnelly covered this same motion. The only real change I've got in mind is that I'm requesting the resignation of the General Manager. I'm not requesting just the start of the recruitment process. So that's my change. And I'm also looking for all expenses from Red Giant to be recovered, plus any costs that have now been incurred because of this flawed recruitment process.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers against? If not, yes. If you'd like to come forward, Mr Brown will just step, Mr Swan will just step to the side.
An amendment, Jeffrey. I also think that we should remove Red Giant as being on the list of consultants for Huon Valley Council for the next 7 years. Would you accept that?
I accept that amendment.
So you are happy to, I'm also calling on the council to seek the recovery of all expenses plus costs from Red Giant for the flawed recruitment process and not to include them in any future recruitment process.
Thank you.
You're happy with that?
Thank you. Next 7 years it was.
7 years. Thank you. Do we have any speakers against the motion? Yes, thank you.
I will be brief. I cannot support a motion that calls for the resignation either of elected members or of the General Manager.
Thank you. Do we have a speaker for? You wish to make a comment, sir? Against? I presume you didn't stand on for.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This might come a bit of a surprise, but I'd like to speak against that motion, in particular the amendment for the 7-year period, because I foreshadow some motions I'm bringing to this meeting which may impact on that, and I think that it's a very serious matter we have before us, and I believe that, that to set a period like that without a proper investigation, it's something that should be done after the investigation, a full and complete investigation into this matter is done. So I can't support the amendment to have the 7-year period, so if that's included in the motion, I'll be voting against the motion. Thank you.
Well, the mover has The mover has accepted that suggestion. Would you like to close debate on it now, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Code. Your wisdom astounds me always. I didn't pick up that. I think there's enough being said, please. The bottom line is that certainly I have no confidence, and I'm sure a great number of our community have no confidence in the General Manager and the recruitment process. So there's nothing to say about the General Manager's abilities and skills to do the job. It's about the fact that he is conflicted and he is an integral part in the process, and he should have stepped away himself once he realised the conflict with which he was in. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour with the amendment as Mr Swan accepted. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Thank you, Mr Swan. Your eighth.
My next motion is a resident and ratepayer of the Huon Valley. My motion to this public meeting is that I have no confidence in the ongoing positions of Mayor Beck Enders, Deputy Mayor Sally Doyle and Councillor Mick Newell because of their complete mismanagement of the flawed GM recruitment process that has resulted in the flawed appointment of a convicted General Manager in Mr Jason Brown. Because these three councillors were unable to comprehend the importance and relevance of the conflict of interest between Mr Brown and his life partner, Miss Joanne Inches, the Managing Director of the recruitment agency, Red Giant, then it is impossible for these three councillors to continue in their role in representing we, the residents of the Huon Valley. This motion is calling for the immediate resignations from Council of the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Newell.
Do I have a seconder to that motion? Thank you, sir. Identify yourself for the record. Thank you. Continue, Mr Swan.
Once again, I see no purpose in elaborating on the detail. Those three councillors were on the GM recruitment panel. They made the decisions to appoint Mr Brown, and to me that's showing no confidence and no understanding of what conflict of interest means. And you shouldn't need to have training to do that because it's in the Good Governance Guide when you're a councillor, and it's laid down. The conflict of interest is very much known in the public service. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a speaker against the motion? If not, I'm going to put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? Thank you. The motion is carried. Your next motion, Mr Swan, number 9.
Once again, this motion has been carried or been moved by Huon Valley Resident Ratepayers Association. Just let me read my version. The Huon Valley Council to release for public viewing the complete and unredacted legal reports as provided to Council from Edge Legal and Simmons Wolfhagen, and all the correspondence between Council and the legal firms and Council to include the Mayor, the GM recruitment panel and Council staff.
I have a seconder to that motion. Thank you, sir. Identify yourself. Thank you. Continue, Mr Swan.
In December, I applied to the Council for a right to information request on this information, and it's been denied by Council. They wouldn't even give me a redacted version of the reports as I requested. So that's been taken now to the Ombudsman. The Ombudsman has investigated to a preliminary investigation. They've accepted my request for information, but they've similarly advised me that it could be some time because there's a huge backlog in the right to information process with the Ombudsman. So the reason for my motion tonight, and again, similar to the Pat Singh's motion, is that I'm asking for Council to provide these reports redacted if they need to be, but in full. But I'm adding to that we also have the Simmons Wolfhagen report, and we also have correspondence in relation to those legal reports from Council.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, raise your hands. Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. We move to item 10. Mr Armstrong. While we're doing that, there are some of these that are very similar, so if you wish to withdraw them, please identify if you do. Thank you. We've had motion 11 withdrawn. Motion 10, Mr Armstrong. Oh, I'm sorry, I've got Stanley Armstrong.
It is Stanley Armstrong. Could I read it for him, please?
Okay, Mr Armstrong's here and given that wave, please. Thank you, sir. That's fine.
Excellent.
Read the motion and we'll look for a seconder.
Thank you. So, oh my goodness, where is the motion? I just had it a minute ago. Hang on. That's because I walked up here. Okay. Here we go. So, the motion is that Mayor Enders be held wholly responsible for the situation created with the flawed recruitment process of the GM, and that she accepts her failures and resigns her position as Mayor.
Do I have a seconder to the motion? Sorry, sir, it's your motion. You can't second it. The gentleman in front of you can. Can't have two bites at the same cherry. It's not big enough. Thank you. Please continue.
Yeah, me. Okay, so when Mayor Enders succeeded in her campaign and secured her position with the Huon Valley Council, we as a community expected great things, and for a while it was good, but slowly over time we witnessed change in our mayor. Less concern for the residents and more focus on future aspirations of a personal manner. A mayor of a local government has a duty to her community. They're expected to engage with professionalism, honesty and integrity, and with total dedication to the ratepayers that elected them into the position. Mayor Enders lost respect from her constituents after she came out as proud Liberal. Quite a surprise, considering she touted independence whilst campaigning. Mayor Enders then proceeded to campaign as a Liberal, supported by Peter Gutwin for the Liberal seat of Franklin. And to accommodate the new desire to enter the big political arena, Mayor Enders seriously compromised her management of our Huon Valley Council. Firstly, by moving the AGM to a different time slot, making it impossible for working people to attend in order for the Mayor to attend a conference in Northern Tasmania the next morning. Trialling a different time slot was the reason given, although, along with it being a cost issue, if at the expected time of 7 p.m, these were not legitimate reasons. Mayor Enders also took extended leave to campaign with the Liberal Party for a few weeks, while still being paid by the Huon Valley Council. Although, following community pressure, I understand she did pay back her allowance. Mayor Enders has once too often left her position to pursue her own agenda and left her fellow councillors and indeed her council with no guidance. This is totally unacceptable when you are the mayor of a local government council, and yet again, here we are with a mayor missing in action and with suggestion of extended leave ahead of this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a speaker against the motion, please? Thank you. Please come forward.
Our Mayor hasn't been missing in action. She's worked very hard for the Huon Valley. I understand everyone's concern, but we all have to look at ourselves as well, and we have to look at our state government. There was a letter today that Tim Tierney read out. He said that they're working on it, but up until now, what we've got, like 2017, the state government amendment targeted review bill. The Minister may specify principles in governing for recruitment. In 2018, the issue of GM performance was included in the review of the local government legislative framework. We have had no leadership from the state government with regards to recruitment. Now, I'm not saying that the process was right. Surely there is governance issues that are at stake here that should have been addressed. However, to vilify a general manager, a mayor that has worked so hard for the Huon Valley, I think we should have a good look at ourselves, because I think some of our blame is for ourselves to look at. We ourselves are electing people. We need to keep an eye on the what's happening in the local government, and I don't think that that enough of us have participated, and that's why you should all be congratulated about coming today, because it shows that
We all share something together. We all share that we care about the Huon Valley. That's something we can all agree on, and the Mayor does too, and that's why I disagree with this motion.
Thank you. Do we have a speaker in favour? Wish to close the debate? No, thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Motion is carried. Motion 11 has been withdrawn. We move to motion 12. Debbie Armstrong. Yes, sir. Keep coming. Not for my judgment, but if you so wish it, we will have the count. If you could just wait, please, Ms Armstrong.
Yep, sure.
In the previous motion 10 you have before you, we're ready to count, girls. Those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand.
Was that me?
Top number. Those against, please raise your hand. Motion is carried. Thank you. We now move on to motion 12. Thank you, Ms Armstrong.
Okay, so I move that the Huon Valley Council request the Office of Local Government, A, establish an independent commission to manage and facilitate investigations into possible corrupt practices. B, that investigate powers to be legislated. C, the independent commission to investigate poor governance practices within the Huon Valley Council in an open and transparent manner. D, the independent commission reports its findings to the appropriate authority to remedial action or prosecution. And E, the independent commission report its findings to the Parliament and the Minister for Local Government for review, validation or further assessment. Council to explain why legal action should not be taken against individual councillors, but openly and deliberately ignore all the independent reports, and confirmed Huon Valley Council was conducting a flawed and conflicted recruitment process of Jason Brown and the inappropriate appointment of him to General Manager of Huon Valley Council. Council to recommence the recruitment process. Failure to recommence the GM appointment process before the conclusion of the probationary period of his employment would see legal action instigated against all councillors who were supportive of the flawed recruitment process. Ratepayers and council insurance must not be liable for legal costs of individual councillors in any legal action. And Huon Valley Council to explain the roles that former GM Emilio Relay and, I don't know how to say his name correctly, and former Commissioner Adriana Taylor played in relation to the General Manager recruitment process and why.
Do I have a seconder to the motion? Thank you, sir. Continue.
Okay. So recently 1,400 Huon Valley residents signed a petition to protest against the flawed recruitment process of the General Manager appointment. The community have been left in disbelief that a process this conflicted could occur. Many residents who are aware of the process that has been undertaken are concerned and alarmed that the appointment did not follow due process and that now we have a GM and head of council who is very conflicted. The appointment has left more questions than answers, and now as ratepayers, we demand that those questions are answered and that council are open and transparent with our community about the flawed process and the subsequent GM appointment. Joanne Inches, the Managing Director of Red Giant, was engaged by Huon Valley Council to recruit a new General Manager. Jason Brown is our newly appointed GM and Joanne Inches is his life partner. Much of the process of Jason Brown's recruitment was conducted in closed council. Therefore, the ratepayers of the Valley were not made aware of the full details of the process or the appointment and are still not fully aware. It did become apparent after a few basic investigations that the name Inches is known in Tasmanian businesses and government circles. The obvious questions to be raised now are, is Joanne Inches protected because of her big business and government connections, or is she protected because of her links to the Minister and the Office of Local Government? And why have they not stepped in and insisted the GM recruitment process start again? The Inches family have held close connections with government and councils across Tasmania.
Thank you. You've got 30 seconds left.
David Inches is the founder of Evolve Tourism and Consultancy and is a brother to Joanne. And Evolve has marketed many Tasmanian tourism campaigns, both for the federal group, Tourism Tasmania and Southern Destinations. Southern Destinations is the southernmost regional tourism organisation incorporating 11 local government departments and is in partnership with Tourism Tasmania. Mayor Enders was a director on the board until her resignation late last year. The Inches family is also known to local government. Brian Inches held the position of General Manager at Circleville Council, and Brian is Joanne's uncle. Peter Gutwin, if re-elected, promised a $600,000 interest-free loan to Hobart Boat Builder PDF Group to construct a new generation
Thank you.
prototype.
Can you wind it up with a closing statement? Thank you.
So basically, everything that happened from April to June, July, August last year, it all revolved around Liberal Party dealings, relationships to council, connections that could be made from general managers, Mayor Enders, the Inches family. So one has to ask, is the Liberal link, tourism link, local government link and Huon Valley link a sheer coincidence?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have a speaker against? Thank you.
I wish to speak against this particular motion because I think after we heard the letter from the Office of Local Government or the Director of Local Government earlier this evening that motion 1 is probably not competent. It exceeds the powers that are actually available, and so there's no point in moving it. And I would believe too that because the councillors believed that they were acting in good faith, irrespective of what people might believe is that case, the fact that they were acting in good faith, then they are probably protected from legal liability anyway. So the issue of whether insurance costs should be applied to it is really a moot point. And so, quite frankly, I don't think it's a competent motion that has anything to be gained from it, and so I speak against it.
Speak for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You make 2 points there in relation to that issue in opposing this motion. One is the Office of Local Government has statutory powers to carry out investigations at the moment, and that is correct. The Office of Local Government have broad powers in terms of administration of the Local Government Act, and their roles and responsibilities are limited under that legislation. And the second point you make about acting in good faith. I cannot see how councillors, individual councillors, acted in good faith when they got a report from Edge Legal that says that the process was flawed and then continued on with that process knowing it was flawed. That is not acting in good faith. So, Madam Chair, this is a very important motion in terms of getting a process in local government to deal with issues that are possibly corrupt and should be investigated. We don't have an anti-corruption commission in Tasmania. Other states do, but there's no corruption in Tasmania, is there? Question mark. Thank you.
Do I have any speakers against? You have your hand up, sir. You wish to make a comment? Yes, for the motion. Then I'll be asking for the motion be closed by the mover.
My comment relates to the letter that Mr Tierney read out at the start of the meeting from the Local Government Director. I've personally been in communication and correspondence now, I think, about 6 months with the Director of Local Government, Mr Lincoln before, and now Mr Healy, and also Minister Roger Jench. There's still outstanding correspondence because I have shown them with evidence that he does have a responsibility under Section 61A of the Local Government Act to intervene in this process. There's good evidence being put forward, and at the moment the Minister has not responded, and it is an outstanding matter. So I agree with the motion and that we need an independent commission set up. This is outside the local government office to investigate what's been going on here, because I have a view, personal view, the Office of Local Government is complicit in this arrangement of this recruitment.
Thank you. Ms Armstrong, would you like to close debate? Okay, the motion is to be put. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? Motion is carried. We now move to motion 13. Mr Peter Code, could Mr D Pennington, if he's in the room, confirm he seconded the motion? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr Code. You may read it and then continue on. The second has been confirmed.
Thank you. I'd like to move that the Huon Valley community supports the Auditor General's report of the 12th of October 2021 and its outcomes that the General Manager recruitment process was flawed. 2, the Huon Valley community also accepts the Edge Legal report considered by Council on the 15th of September, which has confirmed the recruitment process was flawed, which has been acknowledged by the Director of Local Government. It is apparent the Huon Valley Council, councillors and Director of Local Government and the Minister for Local Government and Planning have collectively taken no action to request the flawed recruitment process be recommenced. The Huon Valley community seeks to take legal action against individual councillors, against Red Giant, Managing Director Joanne Inches and the Minister for Local Government and Planning for possible breaches and non-compliance with the provisions of the Local Government Act 1993 in providing good governance and duty of care to the Huon Valley community. It is recommended that the legal action be taken against individual councillors that are supportive of the flawed recruitment process and not the legal entity of the full council. Thank you.
Thank you. Speak to it if you wish.
Do you have a second?
We had the seconder, yes. Okay. Do we have a speaker against? If not, do you wish to close debate, Mr Code?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd appreciate some opposition, but anyway. I think the important points to note here, firstly, I want to make it very, very clear that this motion does not take legal action against the Council. This motion calls on legal action to be taken against the Minister for Local Government and Planning and individual councillors and Red Giant. The Minister claims he cannot intervene in contractual arrangements at Council. We've heard that time and time again. This is correct. It will however be alleged that the Minister possibly knew the GM recruitment process was flawed prior to any finalisation of contractual arrangements for the General Manager appointment. The Minister has also provided with two separate reports. Both found the recruitment process was flawed and conducted inappropriately, including significant representations of concern from the community. It be alleged the Minister possibly failed to act upon the findings of the Edge Legal report appropriately and timely to rectify the failed recruitment process on behalf of the community. It also be alleged the Minister possibly breached his duty of care by not recommending to Council the recommencement of the GM recruitment process prior to any GM contractual arrangements by Council. It be alleged Red Giant possibly breached the duty of care by recommending her partner for the position of General Manager and dismissing 71 applications before declaring a conflict of interest and possibly disregarded the conflict of interest and continued in the recruitment process. Legal action will also be taken against individual councillors for their consideration of the Edge Legal report on the 15th of September 21. They collectively and individually possibly failed to take into consideration the complete findings of the Edge Legal report.
You have 30 seconds left, Mr Code.
Possible breach of duty of care. Thank you. The plaintiff will be seeking from Council as insurer that we will not support the payment of legal costs of councillors. It will be alleged individual councillors did not act in good faith in consideration of the Edge legal report and deliberately and openly rejected the findings of this report. It's a flawed recruitment process. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Do we have a speaker against? If not, do you wish to close the debate, Mr. Code?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This issue, at the end of the day, there's no powers we have in this room as individuals in the system to take action in relation to this matter. The only power that we have is the courts. Unless these councillors make a decision on these motions tonight, the only action you've got is through the courts. And I think we've got a very, very strong case. I've already been in contact with the New South Wales SC, and we're having discussions at the moment, and we're looking to, obviously this is going to be a serious funding effort, but we want this motion to be a test case for Tasmania, to coincide with the federal election, to get an anti-corruption commission in Tasmania, because we badly need it. Other states have got them. We're only a small state, and we need to have this organisation in place. Thank you.
Okay, I will put the motion. That's motion 13. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Motion is carried. We move on to item 14, motion 14. I do note the time is 7:59. We're going to continue. Irene Swan. Thank you. I'm going to continue on, but I do note that we have lost people from the meeting, so I'm going to stick with the timelines. I will warn everybody most strictly. Thank you very much. You are speaking on behalf of Irene Swan in the first instance.
Yes, I am. Thank you. I move that all motions and submissions from this public meeting, when taken back to the next ordinary meeting of council, be discussed openly in open council. I move that there be no discussion from this public meeting be taken into closed council. I move that council adhere to the rules of good governance and to allow councillors to speak freely and openly about any matters concerning the GM recruitment process.
Do we have a seconder to the motion that Mr. Swan is presenting on behalf of Irene Swan? Is Irene with us tonight?
Irene is unwell at home at the moment.
Okay, thank you. You do? Thank you. Okay, we have a seconder to the motion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Continue on.
In the 3+ years since this council was elected in October 2018, we have witnessed secrecy, a lack of transparency and the curtailing of the all-important public question time down from what used to be up to 45 minutes down to a rigid time of 15 minutes, even with a bell. We have witnessed pre-meeting agenda meetings which were denied, but evidence has been provided to confirm there have been staff meetings with councillors to discuss the agenda item before the meeting, which is against the provisions of the Meeting Procedures and Local Government Act. We've witnessed the proliferation of items and discussion being taken into closed council, never to see the light of day by we the ratepayers. Interestingly, Mayor Enders had a brochure in 2018 which was circulated around, and there's a number of items on here, but one of them is about council meetings, and I quote, Mayor Enders says, "My preference is for all council meetings to be open to the public. It is important for residents to see council processes and to hear the discussion and why a decision has been made. There is nothing in the legislation that prevents all council meetings being open to the public." Well, that hasn't been followed through. The lack of transparency was a key issue noted in the Board of Inquiry, and as a community we're all looking forward to a new council who would provide good governance, transparency and truth. And I voted for Mayor Enders on that strength of her promises. Sadly, our council has failed us completely, and the flawed GM recruitment process is the tip of the iceberg and the last straw for this council. We demand transparency going forward for this public meeting. And I even noticed tonight that Councillor Campbell wanted to speak at tonight's meeting, and that's been denied again on the floor of a public meeting, which I don't know why. Thank you.
Do I have a speaker against the motion? Thank you, Mr. Swan. On behalf of Irene Swan, have you anything else to add to closed debate? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Motion is carried. We move to item 15. Mr. Peter Code.
Madam Chair, in introducing this motion, I need to explain the authorities I have been given and the restrictions that are required to be observed in presenting this motion. With your indulgence and permission, I would like to read a letter of authority and statutory declaration before presenting the motion to the meeting. Thank you. I'd like to read the letter of authority and the statutory declaration before presenting the motion. Can I have your permission? Yep, yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, on the 4th of February, I received this letter from Mr. Mike Wilson, a former acting mayor and councillor of the Huon Valley Council. And I'll quote the letter. Dear Peter, I give you my permission for you to publicly release the attached deck that I have prepared for the public meeting tonight at Franklin, as well as to the media. I also request you read the following statement to the meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, I was elected member of the Huon Valley Council for over 20 years and a member of the General Manager Recruitment Panel for that time. It is my opinion the process on the appointment of Mr Brown as General Manager was flawed, which has now been confirmed by the Auditor General in his report of the 12th of October 21. Unfortunately, I cannot be with you at the public meeting tonight to speak as I am in hospital. I've requested Peter Code, respected past Mayor and Councillor of Huon Valley Council, to present the statutory declaration to you on my behalf in regard to the General Manager recruitment process. I've also requested the statutory declaration be forwarded to the Investigation Office of the Local Government Association. Local Government Office. My motivation for doing this, I believe, was one of my ex-fellow councillors, and Councillor Campbell is getting the blame for releasing information on the General Manager appointment. This is not true. It is a very important issue to me and others in our community. I hold the Huon Valley community in high esteem, and I want the community to prosper by having councillors and leadership that will be open and transparent in his dealings. Yours sincerely, Mike Wilson. Madam Chair, I will now quote the statutory declaration under the Oaths Act 2001. I, Michael James Wilson, of 8 Dadu Street, Kingston, Tasmania 7050, occupation former councillor, acting mayor and developer. I do solemnly and sincerely declare that on the 15th of June 2021, I received a phone call from Mr Andrew Wardlaw, acting General Manager of the Huon Valley Council. Mr Wardlaw followed up with a visit to my home at the above address that very afternoon. He advised me I was no longer a councillor of the Huon Valley Council because of issues on my personal details not being correctly updated on the General Manager role. Up to this point in time, I was one of 4 councillors on the General Manager Recruitment Panel. Sometime in mid-July 2021, I was provided with a confidential information relevant to the General Manager recruitment process for one of the 3 remaining members on the General Manager panel. Revealed to me were the names, along with some details of 3 candidates were considered on the short list of applicants for the General Manager position within the Huon Valley Council. The 3 names provided to me were Jason Brown, X and Y. I also informed that they were going to appoint Jason Brown as General Manager. I was surprised as the recruitment process was still underway. I said I was totally inappropriate to be giving this information. Given the potential for the GM recruitment to be conducted in a flawed way, and as a former member of the GM recruitment panel, it was important to me that Council follow good governance and the General Manager recruitment process. In July, I decided it's important that this leak be exposed for what it was, that the media needed to be alerted to what to be a corrupted recruitment process. I did this with knowledge that I was no longer on the GM recruitment panel and that I was no longer a councillor of the Huon Valley Council. I did not want my work as a GM recruitment panel member challenged and disrespected in any way. I make this solemn declaration under the Oaths Act 2001 at Geefton, 1st of February, Michael J. Wilson, before Justice Burgess. Madam Chair, I now move the following motion. I wish to move this motion. The meeting requests the Huon Valley Council to forward the unredacted statutory declaration tabled and read at the public meeting to the Solicitor General, the Auditor General and the Tasmanian Police for a full and detailed investigation, and that a copy be forwarded to the Director of Local Government. The meeting also calls upon Council to conduct an independent investigation into the contents and allegations made in this statutory declaration as a matter of urgency, and to provide a full report to the public of the findings of this investigation. The meeting calls on councillors detailed in the allegations to be requested to take leave of absence while a full and detailed investigation is undertaken, and not to correspond or engage with other councillors or staff of council. The meeting notes the statutory declaration makes serious allegations of corruption and discloses confidential information and possible breach of the Local Government Act and other acts. While some councillors are on leave of absence, their roles shall be performed by other councillors in accordance with Section 27 of the Local Government Act. Madam Chair, I'll move that motion. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder to the motion in the first instance? Thank you. Thank you. Do we have a speaker against the motion? Speaker, anyone wish to speak to it? No. Mr. Kerr, are you happy for, do you wish to say anything else on closing debate? Are you happy for the motion to be put? Yes, there's nobody who wishes to speak for or against it.
No. Thank you, Madam Chair. I certainly have something very important to make in closing. And it is very important also in putting this motion forward that we offer procedural fairness and natural justice to the parties of the allegations contained in this statutory declaration. And really, it's the appropriate authorities to do that investigation. We shouldn't be making any judgments about this at all. It's the appropriate authorities to make those judgments. And I think there's a process outlined in the motion to how we move that forward. And I think the councillors need to take that on board. Those councillors who are not conflicted in this process, those councillors who need to take it on board and move it forward, and bearing in mind those procedural fairness and natural justice principles need to be abided by. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. We now move on to item motion 16. Mr. Swan, can you confirm, Mr. Pennington, that you seconded this motion? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Again, I'll be brief, realising time. Until I got here this evening, I didn't realise that the training for the councillors has already been undertaken and the money has already been spent. My understanding was it was going to happen in February. It seemed to happen in January, December and the 1st of February. So I still wish to just make a comment though, because what I was moving was that the council do not spend any more of our ratepayers' money on engaging an independent firm to teach them conflict of interest training, when the Integrity Commission provides this service free of charge to councils and public servants throughout Tasmania. I tried to get that raised at council meetings, but I was put down by the Mayor, who stated that that wasn't the advice given to them from the Local Government Office and from the LGAT. But I do have a letter I'd like to read out, which came to me only last week, from Mr. Michael Easton, the Chief Executive Officer. Thank you for your email. The Integrity Commission works with public sector organisations to develop education plans for employees. Elected representatives use it at no cost. Our general training for councillors provides an introduction to the Commission, our functions, discussion of the concept of integrity in public service, steps for managing misconduct risks, particularly conflicts of interest, and tools to good guide decision making. Some elements described on the Mayor's press release outline the council's planned training fall outside what we can provide. But To confirm, we were not approached by LGAT, Local Government Division, or the Huon Valley Council to discuss the content of our training of Council's current needs. If approached, we may have been able to work with the Council to develop training within the scope outlined above. So I just want to make a comment that, very disappointingly, our Council has gone ahead, spent money unnecessarily, in my view, because the Integrity Commission provide this free of charge at no cost to the ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a speaker against the motion? Any other speakers for?
Wasn't actually a motion. Sorry, that's not actually a motion because they've already undertaken the training and they've already spent the money as of last week, as of this week.
We have a motion in front of us.
I have got a motion. Okay, the motion was I'll just say, sorry.
We've had it moved and seconded.
I moved that the training was not urgent. It was that we've only got 8 months left of our councils of this current term, so why go ahead and do training at this point in time? One of the quotes that came into council was $23,000. Fortunately, they didn't accept that one. And the Integrity Commission, as I said, would provide this free of service, free of charge. But there's really no motion because the job has already been done.
Thank you. Thank you. There is a motion before us, motion 16. We accept your explanation, sir. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please say aye. Against? Hands? No. Thank you. Motion is carried. Ms Jen Hadaway, motion 17.
Probably about it. Thanks, Lisa. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, I won't take much of your time. I believe that what I'm putting to you tonight is possibly the only way forward, or part of a way forward at the very least.
We've got to get a seconder for the motion before you can continue. So if you formally read the motion, we'll get a seconder and then you can continue. Thank you. Are you happy for it to be taken as read, as long as everybody has a copy? Motion 17.
No, I'll read the motion. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I didn't realise you were waiting on a seconder. I wish to move the following. That this meeting requests the Auditor-General of Tasmania to immediately begin a comprehensive investigation that will answer in detail the points raised in the public petition to the Huon Valley Council that is under discussion here tonight. Further, that the Auditor-General takes each point of the petition separately as follows, and 1. Investigates the process undertaken by the Council for the appointment of the new General Manager. 2. Makes a finding re the implications of the conflicts of interests involved. 3. Advises the Council about what action it should undertake to rectify the situation. 4. Includes in this review 2 areas identified as not part of the earlier limited review, being suitability of the applicant and the identifying and entering into a contract with the consultant. And finally, that the Auditor-General releases a public report of the investigation and the findings as soon as practicable.
Do we have a seconder to the motion, please? Thank you. Lady here. Continue. Thank you.
Some of you will be aware that the Auditor-General brought down a report presented to Parliament on the 12th of October 2021, Council General Manager Recruitment, Appointment and Performance Assessment. The report was widened from the original brief to include a section about the Huon Valley Council, when the Auditor-General responded to rising community concern about an apparently corrupted process initiated and continued by the Council in its recruitment of a new General Manager. I know for fact that there were a large number of people who contacted the Auditor-General, both as independents and as members of various community groups. So Part 2, therefore, of the Auditor-General's report, which was due anyway to be presented to Parliament, relates, and I'm quoting, to the review of Huon Valley Council's recent General Manager recruitment. The Auditor-General goes on to say quite clearly on page 31 what he actually did. I conducted my limited assurance review by making such inquiries and performing such procedures I considered reasonable in the circumstances. And again, on page 32, I quote, my responsibility was to express a limited assurance conclusion on the effectiveness of Council's approach to managing conflicts of interest during the recruitment process to appoint a General Manager. The reason I read those out to you is because it is important to understand that this review and this investigation into the process being undertaken by the Valley was
You have 30 seconds left.
was
Ms.
added
Hathaway.
to the list of councils late in the review, so it was therefore limited. The review didn't investigate the suitability of the applicant or identify entering into a contract with the consultant. The review, as you know, found against the council, saying the recruitment process was flawed with a significant potential for bias and unfair treatment. The findings that were made by the limited review provided advice. It didn't answer many questions which are still being asked by this community that are inherent in the petition and the request for tonight's
Thank you, Ms. Hathaway. Do we have a speaker against the motion? If not, Ms. Hathaway, do you wish to close the debate?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to put to you that this is a possible way forward. There is so little opportunity for community people to take this any further than a public meeting. There are no regulations. There are very limited regulations even in relation to the public meeting itself. This public meeting has been ordered, organised and run by the council. It is not really a public meeting for the public, run by the public. This is a way forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion 18, Mr Brian Miller. Thank you. If you would read the motion and then I'll look for a seconder.
The motion is that the Huon Valley Council and Mayor Enders disclose in full who was involved in the decision-making process which resulted in continuing with the flawed recruitment process from July 2021. Who gave legal and other advice to the panel and the councillors? And this resulted in their decision to continue despite the declared conflict of interest. Did this advice come from the HVC's own legal department? We request that it be disclosed to the residents and ratepayers of the Huon Valley, specifically who gave the advice, what advice was given, and on what grounds.
Seconder to the motion, please. Thank you. Please identify yourself. Thank you. May I continue?
Thank you. Red Giant's Managing Director, Joanne Inches, disclosed a conflict of interest to the Huon Valley Council in July of 2021. The council and or the selection panel subsequently decided to continue with the selection process. This decision-making process is a critical element and is possibly the main reason for the criticism from both the Edge Legal Report and the Auditor General's report, which stated that the potential for bias and unfair treatment of applicants was significant throughout the process. And I think that as ratepayers and residents here, that we should know who gave this legal advice, if there was any advice given, before there was actually a report from Edge Legal or anybody else. I think we deserve to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers against? If not, do you wish to close the debate, sir, or are you just happy for me to put it? Thank you. I'll put the motion, item 18. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Motion 19 has been withdrawn and we move to motion 20, Mr. Derek Pennington. If you read your motion, sir, and I'll look to a seconder.
I'd like to call on Mr. Jason Brown through this meeting to please explain what measures he took to manage his conflict of interest, along with his partner Joanne Inches of Red Giant, appropriately and in accordance with contemporary HR practices, that all conflicts of interest, actual, apprehended, or potential, should be documented and effectively managed during the recruitment process. Could he please refer to the various stages of the progression of his application from the time of submitting his application through the shortlisting selection procedure and ultimately at interview? It appears the Auditor General found the whole recruitment process flawed. Having been appointed to the position, can Mr. Brown further please explain what measures he has taken since starting as General Manager to ensure that the conflict of interest is adequately documented and therefore that there's an ongoing basis for the announcement on the Huon Valley website that the announcement of the new General Manager comes at, and I quote, the end of a rigorous recruitment process.
Thank you. This motion has a seconder, Tim Sanderson. Just for clarification, sir, the motion you handed me is the motion that you're putting forward. The wording in motion 20 on the paperwork I have that was sitting here on my desk is exactly the same. So I just want to clarify that. In case there are concerns out there, the wording of the paperwork that you have in front of you is the wording of this that you handed to me.
Thank you. There was some confusion and discussion each
Okay, thank you. We've clarified that now. Thank you, sir. If you wish to speak more to your motion, it has been seconded.
Extremely briefly, simply to say the calibre of the man does not appear to show through against the requirements, the key requirements of this position.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers against the motion? Yes, thank you, ma'am.
I too will be brief. I think it's inappropriate to ask an individual to answer all of these questions in front of a public meeting without actually having some preparation or some indication that he was going to be expected to answer them. I understand everybody's concern about it, but I just don't think it's appropriate or fair.
Thank you. Let me make it quite plain that there is not an expectation from the Chair that the General Manager will explain and answer these questions here. This is a process, and if the General Manager wishes, when this report goes, to make some comment in writing, on website or whatever, that is the General Manager's responsibility to make that decision. It is not a night here for discussion of inclusion of somebody that is involved in this process. Thank you. Do we have any speakers against the motion? Do you wish to... Yes, sir, you've got your hand up. Yes, you may.
Should have sat in the front row. I just wish to comment on the last speaker, please. At the request of Council, all motions and submissions were required 7 days prior to tonight's public meeting. The General Manager is instructed by the Local Government Act to actually summarise these submissions and motions. The General Manager has had adequate time to see what Mr Pennington's motion, which he just read out, is and about. I understand the Chair's view that we're not expecting councillors or people to speak tonight, but we do expect a response at the next Council meeting from the General Manager to Mr Pennington's motion. Please.
Thank you, sir. And again, in the basis of fairness and equity, in communications I had, it was with Mr Matthew Grimsey. Have I got his name correct? He's not with us tonight due to illness. And as such, there was no interpretation in any of that the General Manager had any input at all into this process. I could be wrong, but I just want to make that quite clear. So as such, this is questions and answers that are into the future. But most certainly this process was organised, and I might say from externally, from my interpretation of limited contact with Mr Matthew Grimsey, who I believe is Legal and Corporate Services Director. Is that correct? Thank you. I've got a thumbs up.
Madam Chair, if I just say that I've been in discussion with Mr Matthew Grimsey, the Deputy President of the Government. I made the inquiry as to if the General Manager can be involved in reviewing the submissions and motions, and the direction from the Director was that he is under legislation to do so, and they can't use an acting General Manager to take on the committee. So whether he did or not, I don't know.
No, I don't know either, but I was just trying to clarify to those here my interpretation of what has happened. It is now a motion before the floor, and if this motion passes, then this will be taken into consideration at the next council meeting by all. Do we have anyone else who wishes to speak to the motion? Mr Pennington, do you wish to close debate? Now there's a hand. Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, sorry, I haven't prepared anything to say, and this only sort of tangentially, I suppose, goes along with this motion, but not having had my submission either on the website or in the summaries here, I do feel somewhat peeved about that. So I just wanted to say that we've heard a lot tonight from the people who've been speaking against the motions about councillors merely being human, and that mistakes can be made, and we can learn from this process, and it's flawed, and we shouldn't expect, you know, so much from people, and we're wasting people's time. But honestly, conflict of interest, it's not rocket science, it's common sense. It's the very least we should be expecting from our councillors. And I feel very upset that Councillor Campbell wasn't allowed to speak tonight. She's one of the only person who resigned from the panel because she was very concerned about the conflict of interest, and yet she's been silenced, gagged, if you like. I'm not happy about that. We've seen that our councillors spent an extraordinary amount of money on training, etc. We've heard people saying, oh, but we're being given no guidance from the state. On the DPAC website, there are so many resources. There's a 94-page good governance guide. It's the least I would expect of anybody who's going to stand up and put their hand up to represent a growing and thriving local government, that they would at least read that document. There is considerable amount in that document about managing conflict of interest. It's not, you know, it's simple common sense. It isn't rocket science. It isn't something that one needs training about.
Thank you. You have 30 seconds more, ma'am.
This sort of behaviour in a private company would not be tolerated, and yet we seem to be saying, oh, it's not an issue. We'll just move on from this and learn from it. That's not good enough. This smacks of plain corruption to me, and for that reason, I support this.
Thank you. We have motion 20 to put to the floor, and please stay within the motion. You're looking to speak, sir? Yes, thank you. And then I'm looking for Mr Pennington to close debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this motion should be supported, and the principal reason why this motion should be supported, the General Manager under Section 65 is required to give qualified advice to Council. And I did mention earlier on about procedural fairness and natural justice. The General Manager has had his lips sealed and he's not able to make comment. And this motion, the community is telling the General Manager, we'll give you the opportunity to give you procedural fairness to tell us your side of the story, because we haven't heard it and it needs to be heard. And that process, this motion should be supported just for procedural fairness, to give the General Manager some process to put information to the Council about how this all came about. And I realise the restrictions placed upon him at the moment, and it must be very difficult for all concerned, and we should really support this motion for that reason alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Pennington, you wish to close debate? No. Thank you. I will put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you all. That concludes the motions for this evening. Of course, as I explained earlier in the process, there will be a report go to the council and the council will deal with that. I thank you all for your presence here this evening and for your politeness and respect as you asked your questions, etc. I wish the Huon Valley area best wishes in actually finishing this process with an ending that, whilst it may not make everybody happy, it may make most people comfortable. Remembering you've got nearly 18,000 people in your community, it's a very important community. So thank you, and on that basis I will close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance. Yes, sir, the meeting's closed.
Madam Chair, if I just may, with your indulgence, say one closing remark, and it's nothing to do with the content of the meeting, but I'd like to personally thank you for coming down. Now, I know this was a bit of a controversial issue, but you've done an excellent job under trying circumstances, and ask everyone to put their hands together, and thank you very much for what you've done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and in the essence of openness and transparency, when I've listened tonight, I think it's important that I let you know my life started with local government. I learned everything I know in local government. When I was requested to put in some sort of potentially a submission to chair this meeting, I did so, and it is a bed for the night and the cost of my car coming back and forth. I'm not a consultant. I don't really know what they do. I know what they charge, and we need them in our life. That's understandable. But that, I want everyone to understand. I'm here because I learnt what I know in local government. It is the element of government closest to the people, and it's very important that we continue a process of learning and growing together. So thank you all for your attendance tonight. The meeting is second time closed.